Hi everyone, it's Nicole. I'm here today with a project for the Vicki Boutin design team. Today I'm going to do a little bit of watercolor resist stamp and stamping. So I'm starting off with the stamp set from the Let's Wander collection. I'm taking my embossing bag here and I'm just running over the background of the foundations paper. And I'm going to start with the largest star shape that's in the stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that with Versamark kind of all over the back of probably about 3/4 of the page. It's a little bit hard to see the Versamark on the white paper right now. You get little bits and pieces of it here on the video. You can kind of see a bit of a shine from the ink, but I'm really just trying to build in a bit of a pattern on the left side of the page, starting with the largest star, and then I'm going to work my way down to the smallest size star in the set. There are, I think, at least 4 or 5 different size stars, and so I want to have a bit of a variety of the size and the shape, so that's why I'm going to do each of the different sizes in the stamp set. So now that I have several of those stars stamped, I'm just adding some clear embossing powder to the top of those stamped images, and I'm just going to make a big mess here with embossing powder everywhere, and then clean that up, and I'm going to start heat setting some of this. If you have a tiny little paintbrush that's dry handy, that help is a good way to kind of clear up any areas you might have stamped that you don't want embossing powder on. So I'm just kind of brushing those off carefully. And then I'm going to go ahead and do my heat setting. You can always heat set and then come back and do a second section. So if you aren't sure if you like the look of what you're doing, you can always go back in after. So I'm going to do a little bit of heat setting. And when I do that, I'm just really holding my embossing gun just far enough away to melt the little beads of the embossing powder and moving it along quickly. I don't want to keep that heat too much in one area. And sometimes it's a good idea to actually put your heat gun to the back of the cardstock or the paper that you're using, just to kind of get the heat to bend backwards. And you can kind of see now that I have some shinier areas. And what I'm going to do is I kind of have two things going on here. I have a bowl of clean water and a dirty bowl. So I'm taking the clean water and just filling in that stamp shape with the clear water, and then adding some color from the watercolor markers, just dropping that in and dabbing that into the open spaces with the dirty kind of water brush pen that I'm using here. So I'm going to do the larger stars kind of in a yellowy orange kind of star, the medium ones here with the tones of green. And what I'm doing is I'm starting with the lighter tone of each star and then filling in with something a little darker. So for these small, teeny tiny stars, I'm going to add the blue. So I'm just going to dab the tiniest little amount of water in each of those stars and then add some of that blue from the watercolor markers that I have here on my glass mat. You can see I have just taken like each of the tones of colors that I'm going to use, and I've just squeezed some of the liquid out of the watercolor markers, and now I'm just adding that to those stars themselves. Again, you want to make sure you add a little bit of water to the stamped images, and then just literally drop a tiny bit of the color into that water pool that you have going on, and that will add the color inside the stamped shape. So you can see I'm using my paper towel just to kind of dab off any extra water. You don't want to have big puddles of water, but you do want to have enough that you can deposit some of the color into each of the shapes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use that mint color and just go to each of the stars here, the middle size star, and just start by adding in that mint color. And then I'm going to go back in after and add that darker green just to kind of add a variation. And you can see I'm just lightly tapping in the color. I'm not painting it in at all. I'm just tapping it in and letting the water kind of pull the color to wherever it wants to go within that stamped image. It's just a nice way to get that kind of deep variation of color. As long as you've only put the water within that stamped image, it shouldn't run over too much, but sometimes, it does do that a little bit. So you just have to be careful when you drop in your water that you dab anything away with a paper towel like I'm doing here. Just so that it doesn't if you don't want it to cover over the edges of your stamp. So you can see I'm starting with the yellow. I'm going to paint in the yellow, just again dabbing in the color and letting the water kind of move it around for me. And then I'm going to go in with a little bit of the orange and just tap it in and let the water kind of move it around. If the water's not moving it around much, that's probably because you need a little bit more water. So then I take my clean water brush, paintbrush here, and I just add a little bit more water to the stamp design, and it will move things around nicely. If you feel like too much color, like if I added too much orange to one of those stars, you just dab it off with a paper towel and then kind of start over adding more water and then more of the color. I'm going to add a little bit more to some of these other shapes here. I'm going to add some plain yellow to this clear open star. So I'm going to add more water, and then I'm going to just put yellow into each of those star shapes. So you can see you can really change up your background design with many different stamps, doing the same technique and changing up your color as you go. You just have to let it dry. You have to be a little bit patient. You can heat set in between. The only problem with heat setting is because you have done the embossing, you really will make that embossing area kind of wet again and whenever you heat it. So you really want to be careful not to do too much of that because it will kind of remelt that embossing powder. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of dabbing things off as I see this drying kind of the way I want it. And I will add my heat gun to the back of the paper just to make sure it doesn't warp too much. And I'm going to add some splatters here with the extra paint I have here on my board. And I'm going to dab off anything extra because I don't want it to be quite too bright. And then here I've basically created my own pattern paper now using the stamps in the Let's Wander collection and the watercolor markers. Super fun way to create your own background. So I'm going to trim off the top now that this is dry and get working on my layout. I'm going to add in some pattern papers here. I have a photo of my son, and I'm not going to add tons of paper only because I've added a lot of color already with those watercolor markers, so I'm going to keep the rest of it pretty neutral. But I do like this fun kind of light blue pattern paper that's in Let's Wander. And then I'm going to add a second one as well. That's that darker kind of navy color that will match well with the tiny small stars that I have stamped. So I'm going to layer those in 2 different sizes together and then add my photo to the top of that. I'm going to put that on the top of my page. And I do feel like it needs just a tiny bit of black to neutralize some of all the bright color. So I'm going to stick some black droplets here, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of my embellishments and my title. I'm actually going to start with my title first, just to kind of fill in most of the area. And then I'm going to add a little bit of stamping and just a few embellishments. Again, I'm going to keep it pretty simple because I have such a busy background there on the left side of the page. I am going to stamp this documented stamp here from in the same Let's Wander stamp set. And I'm going to just fussy cut that out and use that as an embellishment on my page. This is a really fun stamp set. I love all those stars, and the tiny little embellishments and doodads that are on the stamp set are really good to use on a bunch of different types of projects. I have these letter stickers in my stash, so I thought I would use those. I liked the black script, and I thought that balanced the bold colors I've chosen already in the stamping and watercoloring, so I am going to use that. I was going to use some of the Let's Wander chipboard letters, but I just thought I was going to color them in, and I just thought that would be too much of the same sort of color, and we needed some black or a darker color just to ground out those kind of brighter colors already that I have on the page. So I am going to play around a little bit with this title here. I'm using these stickers that are Vicki's. They are from, gosh, are they from Wildflower Honey or Color Kaleidoscope? I can't recall, but they definitely are from one of Vicki's previous collections. And I'm just going to add my title. You'll see that I'm going to move it around a 3rd time now because I really want to use that stamped embellishment that I made. So I am going to peel them off. The good thing about the foam stickers is that you can do that, and there is some forgiveness that you don't need to worry about them kind of ripping your paper, but just be gentle if you do that as well. All right, so I'm going to put these gold sparkly arrows in here. I'm going to add my little photo op stamped image here, and then I want to add a date, of course, because you should always add a date and some journaling to your page if you can. And then I'm just going to add a few tiny little embellishments. I have some fun stars that are in the Let's Wander collection sticker sheet I'm going to add just to kind of add a little bit more of that color over on the right side of the page. But otherwise I keep the rest of this project pretty simple. I will trim this down slightly and mount the whole thing on a bit of a black cardstock background. You can see here that just draws in some of that black and kind of sets the base for the color. I really love how this watercolor type background worked on that left side of the page. It's really fun, really easy to do, doesn't take a lot of time and patience, to be honest, and it doesn't take a lot of product either. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I will see you again next week on the Vicki Boutin blog. Bye-bye.